Many know that Marvel figures are among the most sought after and valuable collectibles on the market. But what few realize is that what may now be the lifeblood of the company once nearly caused its downfall. After merging with a toy company resulted in a hostile corporate takeover, leading to decades of poor marketing decisions, missed opportunities, and disappointed fans. All the result of executives that never truly understood or cared about the characters, lore, or history of the comics. Only the toys that turned a profit from them. So gather round and listen, neckbeards and neats. This is the story of how toys nearly destroyed Marvel Comics. In 1972, Mego Toys began creating 8-inch doll-like figures of Marvel superheroes. These dolls were some of the first officially licensed bits of Marvel merch ever produced, and the line was so successful that an even greater variety of figures were created. Figures with vehicles, figures with stretchy arms, and so much more. Despite a few licensed products, like costumes, predating the toys, it's generally considered that this was the genesis of the Marvel merchandise empire. All those bed sheets, tie-in sodas, and future figures started right here, with these ugly-looking doll things. Unfortunately though, in 1983, a little more than a decade after the Marvel toy phenomena began, the toy company Mego imploded, meaning no more Marvel toys for the masses. But that didn't last long, because in 1984, a revolutionary idea came along that would change the landscape of toy tie-in marketing forever. Mattel picked up the license, and not wanting to distract from their already prominent He-Man marketing, they arranged for Marvel to do the advertising and promotion of these toys themselves. And Marvel did that in the form of the original Secret Wars event series. But despite the toy line's short-lived run, this would be a precedent-setting example of marketing that was way ahead of its time. Back in the day, tying a comic book story to a new set of toys was a completely new idea. But nowadays, that idea is a standard that's applied to everything from movies to video games, TV shows, and more. With some sort of tie-in toy or merch line being standard for pretty much any new product that's released and targeted towards the 13 to 30 demo. But little did Marvelites know that a huge shakeup was coming very soon. A shakeup that would change Marvel forever.
I have a bad feeling about this.
In 1990, a businessman named Ike Perlmutter purchased a company called Toy Biz. And in 1993, Toy Biz made a deal for exclusive, perpetual, royalty-free licenses of Marvel characters in exchange for Marvel taking ownership of 46% of the company. And it would just so happen that a toy designer and longtime comic enthusiast named Avi Arad would come to work for Toy Biz that very same year. And at some point, he would go on to take partial ownership shares of the company, giving him a stake as well. As a result of Marvel's new stake becoming a partial owner of Toy Biz, one of the other owners of Toy Biz, Ike Perlmutter, was elected to be a member of the board of directors for Marvel Comics, even serving as board chairman up until March 1995. Ike, Avi, and other Toy Biz execs were eager to meddle in the creative processes of the company talent. Quickly, the corporate suits began sticking their fingers in as many pies as possible, with the Toy Biz execs taking up newly formed leadership positions, like Avi Arad becoming the new CEO of Marvel Films, and eventually going on to become a major fixture of Sony's future with the Spiderman franchise. All of this led to constantly changing directives and editorial mandates, infuriating a great number of the Marvel staff with all the confusion. It was at this point in time that you had failed reboots like Heroes Reborn and the ever-expanding, constantly complicating Clone Saga, as well as whatever the fuck Liefeld was up to with his X-Force bullshit. It was at this point in time that a number of writers and artists at Marvel would become fed up with the lack of clear direction and leave the company altogether. Some to join competitors like DC, and some to form competitors of their own, like Image Comics. After half a decade of constantly changing leadership, lack of direction, and loss of key talent, in 1996, Marvel went bankrupt, and after a lengthy legal battle, Ike Perlmutter and Avi Arad began a hostile takeover of the company, eventually gaining complete legal control once Toy Biz bought out all the available bank shares of Marvel. After that, the two separate entities were merged into one single company, with Toy Biz and Marvel Comics now becoming Marvel Enterprises. The choices that these Toy Biz execs forced on the universe were drastic, with comics shifting focus from telling fantastic, inspiring stories filled with hope, joy, and wonder to creating poorly drawn, rushed comics filled with hyper-violence and a musk of insecurity. Comics that focused on roid rage monsters bashing each other to death and back again, focusing on whatever team of mutant mercenaries that Liefeld shat out that week. indefinitely. They kept pushing new heroes and new books, hoping that they would be able to sell new #1 issues, variants, and figures from those new heroes and books. With the same gimmicks they used to sell toys, quickly invading the comics through variants and gimmick covers, trying to push a gotta catch 'em all mentality in the most predatory way possible. Even going as far as to prey on consumers by convincing them that these comics would be rare and expensive one day. Spoiler alert, they're not. Just eBay variant covers from the 90s. Seriously. When you look at all the weaker comics that came out between 93 and 98, the really Liefeld-esque stuff, the Clone Saga and Heroes Reborn, and then you see it contrasted with some of the more brilliant books of the era, like Marvel's and Earth X, you can really see the difference between what the Marvel creative side of things wanted to do and what the Toy Biz side of things wanted to do. And keep in mind, this was the very same era that flooded the comic book marketplace with some of the worst, most pervasive trends that still linger today. Stuff like variant, cutout, and lenticular covers, clickbait cover art, and clickbait story threads. A lot of these relics of greed and desperation still linger to this day, like the stench of a turd that just won't stay flushed.
A turd in the wind. Do you feel me?
Wait, I was supposed to be talking about toys this whole time? Oh, oops. Anyway, despite poor decisions and a complete lack of understanding leading to Toy Biz executives ruining the company for an entire decade and continuing to hinder progress even 2 decades later, Toy Biz actually managed to make some pretty decent Marvel toys, with them working on everything from the 90s cartoon toy lines up until the first Spiderman, X-Men, and Hulk movies. In fact, it was actually Toy Biz that began the entire Marvel Legends line and introduced the Build-A-Figure concept to it. With kids from the 70s and 80s reaching adulthood around the time of the 90s, they were seeking out more detailed action figures than the ones that were made for kids. And Toy Biz, having quickly merged with Marvel Comics and understanding the demographic, was eager to fill that niche. The Legends line was created to appeal to those collectors specifically, and with a satisfied niche and continued high demand, Toy Biz quickly realized they had a smash hit on their hands. So much so that the Legends line still runs to this day. And honestly, the Legends figures are the figures that I collect almost exclusively, mainly because they sit right in the middle of affordability, articulation, and original media accuracy. Around 2006, Marvel signed a 5-year deal with Hasbro, giving them the rights to make toys and games off of the Marvel license. And by 2007, the remaining Toy Biz divisions of Marvel shut down entirely. As a kid, I noticed that going from Spider-Man 2 to Spider-Man 3, the figures got about an inch smaller, but the promotional website got about 10 times cooler. And man, in retrospect, this marketing was just as skeevy as Jake Paul's "buy that merch, buy that merch, buy that." But boy did it work on getting me interested in Star Wars and Spider-Man merch. I probably wouldn't have cared about it at all otherwise. Amongst the various brands of Marvel merch that Hasbro makes, Marvel Legends have continually been the most popular with collectors, with the line recently expanding into smaller, more budget-friendly 3.75-inch figures, as well as movie-accurate prop replicas like helmets and weapons. If you're new to collecting and feel a bit intimidated by all this history, fret not, because I'm about to give you a brief crash course on what options a new collector has. Because if you're just now getting into Marvel merch, there are a lot more than just Legends and old school collectibles. These are a few of your options. When Disney canceled their Infinity video game and line of figures, they thought it was best not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and as a result of that, they began the Toy Box line of figures based off of the now defunct Disney Infinity line of video games. Out of all the children's action figures, these easily have the best build quality, the best designs, and the best articulation, but all with the trade-off of being the most expensive out of all the children's figures. But if you're looking for something a little bit more adult, maybe consider Marvel Selects. Marvel Selects are 1/10 scale action figures by Diamond Select Toys. They're slightly larger than the Legends, running 9 to 10 inches as opposed to the Legends 6 inches. The trade-off here is that these figures typically have better sculpts and paint, but they also have poor articulation. These figures tend to be a little bit more expensive and harder to find than Marvel Legends. Plus, whereas there are tons of different Spider-Man variants in the Legends line, the alternative costumes for Spidey in the Selects line is a lot more limited. To put things into perspective, there are about 130 different Marvel Selects altogether, but there are more than 300 to 400 different Marvel Legends, so the Legends line clearly has a lot more diversity and variation. Plus, they're cheaper. Pop vinyls are easily the most basic bitch of all collectibles. Not just of Marvel figures, but of all collectibles in general. And if you collect them, that's cool, no judgment, but if you don't collect them, be aware that Pops carry a certain stigma about them. Their designs are cheap, ugly, and lazy. They're not even cute. And yeah, before anyone calls me out, yes, I do have a few, but that's because for characters like the Tick and Log Lady, the only collectibles featuring them are pop vinyls. Which might have something to do with the fact that pop vinyl has a monopoly on cheap sub-niche licensed collectibles, but I mean, who knows? That's, a topic for another day. But on the opposite end of the collecting spectrum, some of the most sought after, respected, and loved figures are Hot Toys. Hot Toys figures are easily the most well-crafted and expensive of all Marvel collectibles. My dream figure is an Iron Man Mark 7 Hot Toys.
Next time, baby.
Hot Toys are known for their uncanny, lifelike appearance, beautiful sculpts, amazing articulation, and ludicrously expensive price tags. The price tag might be high on these, but man, honestly, figures just do not get better than this. This is the top of the top of the top of the line. But if you're interested in larger, more detailed figures, but you can't dedicate yourself to spending over $200 or $300 on a figure, there are cheaper alternatives. Among the more sought-after collectible figures are Square Enix Kai and Figuarts figures. Figuarts and Kai's build and design quality fall somewhere between the Legends and Hot Toys. While joints and points of articulation are more visible and clearly defined, the movie accuracy is still there, and they run at a fraction of what the Hot Toys typically cost. And while I don't own any Square Marvel figures, I do own a Feora one, and I'm a big fan of it, enough to the point that I definitely plan on getting some sort of Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts figure art in the future. Probably Noctis or Riku, but I digress. Now of course you have your kids' toys, but let's be real. You're probably an adult or in college, or at least at an age where you might want something with a little bit more bang for your buck. You don't want something that looks like it belongs on the floor of a kindergarten. You want something that looks good on a shelf. Something that when you look at it, makes you feel good. Maybe something that makes you feel like you accomplished something with your purchase. Maybe like you built it from the ground up. Well, that's where Lego comes in. Legos are intended for as wide an audience as possible, from ages 9 to 99. Legos are just as appealing to collectors as they are to kids, and I'm a big fan of them, but to be real, your shelves can get crowded really quickly with bulky vehicles. So if you do want to collect Legos, just be aware that if you intend on amassing a large collection, that they'll start to take up a significant amount of shelf space sooner than later. But let's say you like the minifigs, but you're not so into the brick building. Well, that's where Mini-Mates come in. Mini-Mates are small little boxy figures that have swappable interchangeable parts and usually come in 2-packs. They're a lot like Lego minifigures, but a little bit bigger. Mini-Mates have been around as long as I can remember, and if I had to guess, they probably started making these to compete with Lego minifigures, because these started way back before Lego ever got the licenses to DC or Marvel characters. When I was a kid, I used to love looking through the designs of these on different fan sites, but I had never bought one until recently. You can see this one here next to a 6-inch Legend and a Lego minifigure for a height comparison.
Now of course, these aren't the only brands of action figures available to Marvel fans. There are also some rivals to the Hot Toys and Play Arts type figures, like MAFEX figures, and those figures run at a similar price tag to the Play Arts figures. But honestly, there's just so much merch that there's no way I could ever go over every individual line of figures. But I did try to hit what I thought were the most important and significant lines. So if there's any brand of Marvel merch that I left out, but you enjoy, please let me know in the comments down below. So with all that being said, I think it's about time to finally wrap things up. I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon, and the fans who made this amazing fan art for me. When I started this channel 2 years ago, I never imagined the outpouring of support I'd see from other comic book enthusiasts. It seriously means the world. I'm super thankful for everyone who helped make Super Swim Team 7 what it is today. If you haven't already, maybe consider checking out my Joker video or some of the other content on the channel. But with all that being said, I've been Swim Team Captain 7, signing off.